the Liberty Weekly Podcast, Episode 6.
Freedom of speech cannot be upheld as an absolute, except as it is subsumed under the general rights of property of the individual, emphatically including property right in his own person. The man who shouts fire in a crowded theater has no right to do so because he is aggressing against the contractual property rights of the theater owner and of the patrons of the performance. Aside from invasions of property, however, freedom of speech will necessarily be upheld to the uttermost by every libertarian. Freedom to say, print, and sell any utterance becomes an absolute right in whatever area the speech or expression chooses to cover. What, for example, of incitement to riot, in which the speaker is held guilty of a crime for whipping up a mob, which then riots and commits various actions and crimes against person and property. In our view, incitement can only be considered a crime if we deny every man's freedom of will and of choice, and assume that if A tells B and C, you and him go ahead and riot, that somehow B and C are then helplessly determined to proceed and commit the wrongful act. But the libertarian, who believes in freedom of the will, must insist that while it might be immoral or unfortunate for A to advocate a riot, that this is strictly in the realm of advocacy and should not be subject to legal penalty.
Hello and welcome back to the Liberty Weekly Podcast. I'm your co-host Jerry McCollum, and this is my host Patrick McFarland.
Hey everybody.
Today, this episode is a little bit more disjointed than normal. We set up all of our recording equipment and started talking with each other, and then suddenly we're like, wait, this is great. We need to start recording this. So hopefully you can follow along. But in general today, we're going to be talking about something a little bit different, but we're going to be talking about the social justice community and that style of thought and some things related to that, like free speech. We begin by talking about a criticism of the kinds of thoughts and theories within the social justice community. Then we later talk about the drama around Laci Green, a social justice commentator who recently is breaking ranks, in air quotes. And then we finish up talking about free speech and some of the legal ideas and concepts around it.
Oh, and then if I may dive in here, I got one more thing to bring up before we get into the podcast here. I'd just like to give a shout out to a listener. His screen name on YouTube is Rearden, and I just discovered a really great plug that he gave us on a website that I'll put in the show notes here. But I just wanted to mention him on the show, and thanks that we really appreciate his feedback and him mentioning us and giving us this review on the website that I'll link below, and we really do appreciate it. So thanks so much, Rearden. So if you're a listener of the show here and you like what we do, consider giving us a spot or telling your friends or suggesting us, or give us a review on iTunes or one of the many platforms that we appear on. It'll be mutually beneficial, so to speak, because it will encourage us to produce more content and get us more exposure. And in turn, hopefully you'll have more stuff to enjoy. So please consider doing that for us. And now, without any further ado, we'll get into the show. Thanks again.
Okay.
So we're talking about the oppression stack.
Okay, so the oppression stack, I don't believe is an idea that explicitly exists within the, for lack of a better term, social justice community, but it's an idea that exists in the anti-social justice community, and that is that there is a hierarchy of who is the most oppressed out of what groups, or like what things mean someone's the most oppressed. And that means that when there's a situation where there's two groups that are normally considered minorities, this hierarchy determines which one is sympathetic and which one is not. So, like, for example, like Cologne, Germany, where there were reports of women being sexually harassed or raped by Muslims, the oppression stack has Muslims over women. And so there were a lot of people saying things like, I would rather be raped by a Muslim than some. I apologize, I don't remember this exact quote. And this, of course, is a very hyperbolic example and doesn't necessarily reflect what everyone thinks. But there are people saying that they would rather be raped or sexually harassed by a Muslim than have something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but like have something significantly less mundane happen to them by someone who's a white supremacist or a white male or something like that. And I apologize that I don't remember the exact quote, but it's those kinds of things. So like right now, I believe gay men are on the bottom of the oppression stack. And
wow.
So they are, they're now a group that can be targeted or can be ridiculed by people who are higher up that stack, or will have sympathy, will lose their sympathy when they're in conflict with a group that's higher up the stack. And so that's what the oppression stack is. And it's not exactly defined or anything like that, but Muslims, by far, Muslims are at the top, above trans people, above gay people, above homosexual. Yeah.
No.
So, which is one of the things that's really absurd to us is the Muslim community, maybe not so much in the United States, but especially outside of especially within the Middle East, is I don't like to use the phobia terms that often because a phobia is like a medical condition, but I would say that you could actually use the term homophobic and transphobic because they actually it depends on each country, but homosexuality is actually illegal. It's something that people get killed for there.
Yeah, they throw them off buildings.
Yeah. And that's something that it's ridiculous to me that I don't see those actions being criticized from the social justice community. And instead they're talking about someone within a Western country is getting harassed by someone else, being harassed by a man or something, and this is terrible, when it's like they would rather talk about people like Muslim people in some Western country being harassed, and they're not saying that they would rather focus on it, is what I mean. They would rather have their coverage dedicated to that than to these terrible things happening to someone in the Middle East.
That's crazy.
So that's what the progressive stack is.
But you said this was a term that was coined by the anti-SJW community?
I'm fairly certain. I don't think that this is something. It's sort of like a meta theory, if that makes sense. So it's something that it's observing the actions taken by people within the social justice community, and from there they're determining that they have this hierarchy in it.
Okay.
It's not something that I don't believe it's something that is explicitly said within that community about there being certain groups that should have more sympathy than others.
So it's prescriptive, not descriptive.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And but it's not. Sorry, no. It's this is a descriptive theory because it's looking at what they do, and it's kind of it's something that's describing behavior. So I would say it's descriptive.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's so class struggle based.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the situation with Laci Green, I don't think that Laci Green herself isn't particularly important, and I don't mean that as a diss or anything like that.
Well, let's just say who Laci Green is first.
Okay, she is a she's someone on YouTube, and I believe she also has an MTV show called Brawless. I don't know if it's published on TV or if it's just online, but she has maybe currently works with MTV, and she's on YouTube. She's had a lot of work where she has some like sex ed content and feminist content on YouTube as well. And I believe she's also gone around she's done talks and demonstrations for sex ed and those sort of things. Recently, she put out on YouTube, a video talking about herself being, in quotes, red pilled, which it is a hyperbolic title purposefully meant to create controversy and get attention. So I think that this has caused a lot. I think these red pill comments cause a lot of confusion. So if you don't understand what this red pilling means, the red pill analogy from the Matrix is an analogy that's used quite a bit in a lot of different communities. So it can have different context within a lot of different communities. Like I know of a couple different communities that use the term the red pill to mean completely different things.
It makes me think of the alt-right just out of the box.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. The MGTOW community uses the red pill analogy. The
MGTOW is men going their own way.
Yeah. The TM rational skeptic, the rational skeptic TM community uses the term red pill, and the alt-right uses the term red pill, and what they're actually referring to is when someone is introduced or accepts their own ideas. So in each context, the red pill is actually something different. In this context, I believe that this red pill that she's referring to is one of a lot of people assume that the red pill that she's referring to, or that when she says I've been getting red pilled, is that of the anti-social justice community. But if you look at the actual content of the video, that's in no way what she's saying. What she's saying is it starts off with some self-criticism of the social justice movement. Particularly, it's looking at a paper that was published in a feminist journal that there's a public outcry that happened because of it, and this journal was redacted this article was redacted from the journal, not because it was wrong or because the theories were wrong, but because it in quotes caused harm and was something that was, it was bad for the community. It wasn't something that was actually incoherent or nonsensical or incorrect. It was criticized because it hurt people's feelings, basically.
Fair criticism.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And she saw this taken down, and she did some self-reflection from that. And so she said, I want to start talking with people that, I want to be more open to disagreement within our community. I want to start talking and engaging with people who explicitly disagree with me. And that caused a pretty big stir that got a lot of people real riled up and talking about,
I think that's a noble sentiment. I mean, definitely disagree with
it is.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of nuance around it, because first off, she definitely was presenting this in a way of it being radical and extreme. And I guess you could make a case that it is within certain certain social justice communities, but she was using the term red pill, hyped it up. And
she's trying to be edgy.
I don't claim to read her mind.
Yeah.
But if anything, causing controversy is a great way to get attention and to get more views. And I don't say that in a bad way. I'm not saying that as something that is terrible and she, and it's awful that she did this, but that's just a fact of life, is that drama is something that people are interested in paying attention to. And if you have something, if you create a dramatic incident or make an incident more dramatic than it actually is, or a video more dramatic than it actually is, it's better for your business. And, I value neutral, that's not bad or good. I'm just saying that is a fact of life.
Oh, I think that's a positive aspect. I mean, you look at bands like Cannibal Corpse,
yeah.
And it got them a lot of attention.
Oh yeah. I mean, Defense Distributed, with the content that Defense Distributed put out, was great. It was highly controversial.
What is Defense Distributed?
Defense Distributed is the organization that created the Liberator, which was a which is
the machining.
No, there's the Liberator specifically is a fully 3D printable gun.
Yeah.
Except for it requires a nail for a firing pin, and it's not actually useful. Just it's kind of more of a statement. It's not I don't suggest anyone actually go and make one. I don't think if you want a gun, and you're in America, move to a state that allows you to have a gun and buy a real gun, because it'll be significantly better than the one-shot plastic Liberator that you have to replace after shooting it, I think only a few times, if not once.
Yeah.
But it was more of a statement that, look, you can create a gun using a 3D printer here. You can buy a thing, you can press a button and have a gun and you can't do anything about it. And it was really hyped up, and the mainstream community like flipped their shit over it, and it was great. It was really entertaining as a voluntarist at this time to see this. And later on, he had another video out for a product called the Ghost Gunner, which I don't know if it's been released.
Yeah.
I think that at least pre-orders have gone out. But
I thought Tom Woods had the creator on his show. Maybe I can link to that in the show notes page.
But he does this deliberately. But he started off with a clip of someone who was talking about ghost guns, which is it became a meme. It was that term really wasn't around before this. I don't know, congressperson, someone was doing a talk about this thing is a ghost gun. It doesn't have to be registered with the government or not. And he had this scary black rifle that he was showing people. And what Defense Distributed did was take that video and use it as their marketing, Brilliant. So they
I'll link to that.
Like, this is a ghost gun. Like, this can't be tracked. And then it just cut in like videos of like a CNC machine like drilling out an 80% lower to create like a manufactured weapon, which doesn't have to be registered. No one knows about it. You know, like you can't transfer it. Like you can, as long as you're federally, you can manufacture firearms, but to give them to anyone else, you have to get a license to be a weapons manufacturer, and then there's all this other stuff. But anyone can. This is something that's great. There should be more. You know, no matter how much our gun rights have been limited, at least we can make our own gun, and there are ways that we can get around things to have a very functional and useful firearm that you can make in your own home with a CNC machine. But anyway, we got really off topic.
Yeah,
so going back
to detract you from Laci Green. Let's go back.
Defense Distributed is great. His theory of marketing is ingenious, and it on one hand makes a mockery of his opponents and terrifies them and scares them, while the people who get what's going on get a really good laugh out of it.
We got a kick out of it here too. Yeah. But back to Laci Green.
Back to Laci Green. So, she has the comments like very hyperbolic, but the only thing was that she agreed to start having conversation. Not agreed. She admitted that she wants to start being more open to conversations with people that disagree with her. And the community around her, there's a lot of people being ridiculous and freaking out. So on the social justice side, there's a lot of people saying that she's a turncoat, that she is now alt-right, or like ridiculous things like that she's no longer with them, even though she still believes the same things that she's always believed. And then there's people on the opposite side of the fence, on the anti-SJW side, who are, which I'm a lot more familiar with, but who are saying anything from like, wow, this is super great, like embracing her with open arms, like super hyped, like, oh wow, you're gonna, mistakenly thinking that she is now anti-social justice, which she isn't. There's people who are like, no, this is a terrible thing, like don't come over here, we hate you. And then there's a lot of people being like, I'm pretty skeptical about this, and I'm pretty skeptical about this.
But it's always entertaining to watch them cannibalize themselves.
Yeah. So it's I don't know how honest Laci will go about this, and in general, she's doing everything she can, I believe, to turn this into a spectacle. And like most recently, I think like a day or two ago, she created another video that was talking about people's responses to her in quotes coming out, which is ridiculous.
She's coming out as a rational being in a sense.
She's coming out as someone who's willing to have a public debate with someone who disagrees with her. That's it. why is this so crazy? And the reason why I think this is important,
because it's the current year,
and why it's important to talk about goddamn current year. The reason why I think it's important to talk about is that it shows the what each community is like generally. It shows what people like, how there's a lot of people within the social justice community who are opposed to communication. They're opposed to, for lack of a better term, the free marketplace of ideas. They're not interested in having a debate or anything like that. And it shows that people generally on the anti side, at least, are a lot more welcoming, if not a little foolish, for accepting her so readily as a lot of them did. But that's the issue around Laci Green.
Well, that kind of encapsulates their whole ideas of what the First Amendment is and what freedom of speech means. Like on the U of M campus, freedom of speech means, you can say anything you want as long as you don't offend someone.
Yeah. This is an interesting topic. To get, I'm assuming this is the opinion that both of us have, but our view on freedom of speech and freedom of expression is the most extreme way that I can put it is that hate speech is the speech that needs to be the most protected.
Yeah.
And that, it's not that I particularly like or am sympathetic to what is called, these are like air quotes, called hate speech, but it's the speech that you don't like is the speech that needs to be around.
Well, like Ron Paul says, we don't have the First Amendment to talk about the weather.
Yeah. It's everyone should be able to, within, freedom of speech is specific, within the United States, like the First Amendment is something that applies specifically to, public areas and stuff like that. But when it comes to like private areas, I think it's really important I prefer that people allow speech and communication and whatnot, and that they disapprove of, because...
And that's interesting, because I am also a First Amendment absolutist, but when it comes... I'm not interested in the First Amendment in terms of legal theory, because I think that when you have public areas... when you have a government, you by necessity have public ownership of certain things. And in that instance... then you have the First Amendment issue, because, who can say what in public spaces? I think, to me, I'm not at all interested in it, because in my ideal society...
There wouldn't be public spaces.
There'd be no public space, so whoever owns the space can dictate what is said on it.
Yeah, and I'm in the same way. I think that, so everyone has a right to say... to use their own property to communicate in any way that they please, and what they they can say whatever they want. And I also think so, that's kind of, but I also think that people should, this is not something that I think this is something that's tangential to the non-aggression principle. I don't think it's something that's inherent to it, but something that a lot of people in our community would be supportive of, and I think is very important, is that if within your property or within whatever, let's say like your website or something like that, you should allow any kind of expression there. And of course, they're like, I totally get why some places wouldn't want that. Like if you have a site for children, that's fine. If you and people want to have a situation where the speech is limited, that's all right. But I think that areas that are at least ostensibly for open dialogue or expressing yourself should be ones that have no limitations on them.
Public spaces.
Like public spaces.
Yeah.
So obviously Twitter is owned by someone, but I think that ideally Twitter would be treated as a public space where anything can be put up. And that's not a situation that we're in. And the best way that if you want to have a public space that is supports the ideas of freedom of expression is to, in quotes, public space, a place that is
a private public space.
A private public
like
space.
Steemit.
Is to go to a place
Minds,
like Steemit or Minds. Some place that is, it says that it's more open, at least, to controversial things. This is telling of I guess you might call them the far left or of the social justice community, that they do not support this idea of free expression, or this, they don't want to encourage dialogue between people who disagree. They want to minimize the dialogue of people that they disagree with, which I think is foolish.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, if you,
and when we're in a society that has a government, so any place within the modern era, having people around, there being people who want to limit your speech is very dangerous, because they're more likely going to be going to the government to limit your expression, which is going to be through violence, which would be terrible.
Yeah, like Antifa.
Yeah.
And that's funny, because in the last episode where I was talking about the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions, I realized as I was recording it that the Federalists and the Alien and Sedition Acts was completely a parallel, a far past parallel of what we're witnessing today with Antifa.
I remember, like when I learned about those like a really long time ago, I was like blown away. I was like, what? Like, how many years past the ratification of the Constitution was this? Like
7?
Like how?
Well, it was 98, so it'd be 9 years.
9 years.
About,
yeah. Wait, I was like shocked that kind of sentiment would be possible within the minds of the founding fathers.
Oh yeah,
and that blew me away.
Well, and it was ironic too, because part of the Federalist argument in the House when they were, or the Senate when they were trying to pass it, was that well, you know, you Republicans, you support the states' rights to be able to limit free speech too, and they're like, well, you don't know how federalism works, small f federalism.
Yeah,
but the specific story I'm talking about is, I mean, it had to do with the French Revolution, but American sympathizers for the French Revolution would wear the cockade, the French cockade, red, white, and blue. And if you were seen outside, the Federalists would come out en masse with a black cockade, black bloc, Antifa, and they would beat the crap out of you. And so, I mean, and that's what I was referring to in, I don't know, episode 1 or 2, about how I was always like, oh, what's happening to our country? You know, it seems lately like we're having all our freedoms limited. Well, it's not new. You know, It's been a struggle.
It's strange how history repeats itself.
Yeah,
you don't expect it, but like that's not something that I ever expected to see, and then it's there.
Yeah, and people are ignorant of history repeating itself somehow too.
Yeah,
because like the story is old as time. You know what we're experiencing right now, in a sense. You know,
is people attacking other people for disagreeing with them.
Yeah, but also, you know, the story of the Republic too is old as time, like ancient Rome. And I don't know.
Wait, what you're saying? The story of the Republic is like the
fall of the Roman Empire.
You have this a country or something starts off with an ideal of what it is, and then that withers away and degrades into is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, the parallel is more nuanced, because you know, in Rome you have the Republic existing for hundreds of years before it turns into an empire. Yeah, but ours, I guess you could say maybe similarly in the history of America, you have all the colonists coming and settling, and they create a very laissez-faire society. And then you have the American Revolution, which establishes our system of government, which was based on the earlier principles of decentralization, but then it devolves into, you know, oligarchy.
Oh, and this is an interesting factoid. I thought this was great. I recently watched a video and I learned about the history of the term emperor. Yeah, and the Roman Republic, one of the things that was a mark of pride about it was that it did not have a king, and that there wasn't one supreme ruler that dictated everything that happened within that country. And this was really important. They didn't have a king, but when they got when they actually got an emperor, which that term wasn't around at that time. It functionally was like a king, but they couldn't call it that because that would be bad.
It was taboo.
It was taboo, and so later the term emperor came around, but the term Kaiser was used to describe that position. And so one thing I just think is neat is that they got a king, but they can't speak of it like a king. And so they have to create a new language to describe what's something that already exists.
That's Orwellian,
yeah,
in a sense.
And like similarly nowadays, like at least in the United States, on its face, if you look at everything that's on the surface, the president of the United States is a dictator for 4 to 8 years at a time with executive orders and those sorts of things. But there could be a lot more going on behind the scenes, which is something that we're sympathetic to that idea.
Rings within rings.
Yeah, but at least on the surface, if you look at the actions that presidents have taken, they absolutely are dictators. Like if you look at what Lincoln did in the Civil War, like it's absolutely atrocious.
Suspension of habeas corpus.
Exactly.
And,
like that's absurd. And now it's normal and routine for the president to not consult Congress when declaring a war, and you can make executive orders that just change the law of the land, and that's something that wasn't supposed to happen.
Yeah, especially when the war power, and they make all these excuses for it. Like the left, and they're smart. They're so and we were talking about how fellow law students maybe don't know the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And what I was trying to say is that they do, and they are so intelligent, and that's the problem, is that they are so I don't know. They will weasel their way into any argument. And
it's you can be smart, and that just means that when you're wrong, you are very clever about being wrong.
Yeah.
And
you're so convincing that you've convinced yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just this sounds kind of like we're prancing about saying we're absolutely right. Like
no.
We don't mean to say it like that.
Well, I mean, I'm right all the time. I don't know about you, Jerry.
I think my beliefs are correct, but I'm open to the idea that I might be wrong about things.
About certain.
As open as the I'm only giving lip service to saying that I'm open. I can't claim that I do a lot of I actively seek out people that disagree with me. But I don't for sure believe I'm correct, which I think that's an important sentiment to have, because there's definitely, for sure, what I see on the left within the social justice community is a sentiment of they know that they're correct, and that really bugs me. That really bothers me quite a bit.
See, that would maybe be my hubris, is that I'm so convinced of the message of liberty and certain things within, I'm so convinced that capitalism is correct. And I use capitalism because I don't identify with the term but free markets, voluntary exchange. I'm so convinced of that, and maybe that's not what you mean. Do you mean with the minutia?
No. I mean, I'm open to the idea that I'm entirely wrong. I don't think I am, but
see, I'm not.
It's certainly possible, and I'm not saying that I take action towards trying to convince myself otherwise.
Yeah.
But what I see from people on the left who are interested in limiting discussion is that they're showing that they know that they're correct, and that they want to get rid of people that disagree with them because they know that they're wrong, and they want to at least socially enforce and sometimes legally enforce their views on the people around them.
Well, what else can we say about the SJW community? I mean, experiencing it firsthand at the U of M was very interesting, and I always throw out my experience there because I don't know. I'm so bitter about it.
Yeah.
But where have you experienced it?
Well, I had a girlfriend who was very much someone who is interested in social justice. This is not necessarily, this is an anecdote. This is absolutely an anecdote, but the company that she kept they all didn't seem to be in their best mental states. I don't know how else to. I'm trying to think of a way to, I'm being deliberately vague, but the people that I've met who are very openly for social justice or for things like intersectionalism are people that I've noticed are not very emotionally healthy. And those are anecdotes that, that's like my main experience. And these are people who sarcastically, jokingly on the wall of their room had a letters that said "Kill all men." Like it was like they put it up for a party and they left it up. And I definitely get why that would be funny. I understand that, but it was a little unnerving,
Oddly enough, I had an experience like that where at the house we lived at together, my wife and I, we were painting one day, or so, I don't know what we were doing, but I had blue masking tape. And as a joke, I put up a swastika on the wall. And I left it there, and it made our roommate mad.
Yeah.
Because I think he saw it, and he was like, what? I mean, oddly enough, our roommate had a Che Guevara poster.
Yeah,
so I was like, and mine was ironic, and his wasn't.
Oh, yeah, no. We actually, confronted is a strong word. We were like, we talked to him about it.
Yeah.
And he defended Che Guevara.
Yeah.
He was like, no, I'm pretty sure he still thinks Che Guevara is a good person.
Yeah.
Well, our opinion is that he was.
He killed people.
That he personally killed people. He personally enjoyed murdering
gays.
I
which are lower on the strata, right?
I guess I'm not sure. I from what I understand, people just don't know that Che Guevara was a mass murderer.
Yeah, and a rapist.
They just don't know. They don't get that he was a bad person.
We should link to something in the. I know there's a really good Stefan Molyneux video on Che Guevara.
Yeah, there is.
And
we'll put something like that in the show notes.
Yeah. And but our roommate is a really good guy. We're good friends with him.
Yeah.
He's just misguided like many other millennials. And he doesn't listen to the podcast, so I wouldn't.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it. I mean, if he does, that would be hilarious, and
we'd have to talk to him again.
Send us a message. Yeah, it'd be great to he was a real fun guy. Like the last time we talked to each other, he actually like sent me like an anarchist joke. Like he sent me like a joke making fun of roads, and I was like, that's great.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't want to straw man him, but I would assume he's a Paul Krugmanite, like a Keynesian, because he did an internship at the Fed in St. Paul, or no, it's in Minneapolis, I think.
Yeah. I have no idea. We never talked to him.
And then he made a joke to me about it too. He's like, "Yeah, I'm interning at the Fed," and I was like, "Oh." And yeah, it was real funny. But he's a good guy. I didn't know, because when we were still living together, Ron Paul came to talk, and I didn't know if he knew about that, or that's an aside. But
I don't know.
Okay, but we were talking before about the First Amendment and about public spaces, and I had a legal thought, like about First Amendment absolutism.
Okay.
So Walter Block has a great series called Defending the Undefendable, right? And so one of those essays is about defending the man who yells fire in a crowded movie theater and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I haven't read it recently. I've read some of his stuff, but from a legal standpoint, I could entertain First Amendment restrictions when it comes to verbal acts. And a verbal act is when you say something that is an act in of itself. The act of saying something, and this is an example, is yelling fire in a crowded movie theater is limiting that speech, is limiting a verbal act which would be negligent in putting the lives of many people in danger.
Yeah.
And so the argument goes. And so, but where do you draw the line? What is a verbal act and what isn't?
At least this is something that an argument that I've seen people make is they'll go there's a lot of people who seem to think that speech can be violence, which I wholly disagree with. But they talk about like it's important to prevent hate speech from happening because hate speech hurts people, or hate speech encourages people to be violent and do something that it encourages people to do something that is actually violent.
Yeah, and I've heard that's the argument I've heard.
Yeah, and that's why I think that the saying I don't think that's a good argument at all. I think that it's quite a few too many steps removed from the act of violence, and there are plenty of times where people believe things that would have very sinister consequences, but they don't act on it.
Yeah.
And it's the action itself, the action of violating someone's property rights, which is the thing that's bad. It's not thinking about violating someone's property rights or encouraging someone to think about something that would violate other people's property rights. It's the actual act of doing it.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree. And when it comes to First Amendment law, what you learn is, there's certain things that are unprotected, and one of them is fighting words. And so in a certain instance, if you go up to someone and say something that is likely to evoke a violent response, or it'd be evoke, not invoke. Those are this is an aside, but those are some of the words that people commonly misuse.
Yeah.
So I've been a stickler. Who and whom, and there and there, and your and your. I'm a grammar Nazi in a sense. We were talking about the swastika on the wall. That's what it was for.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, but I was talking. So if you go up and you say something that would be likely to evoke a violent response, then that's not protected under the First Amendment. And I, would assert that the onus is on the other person. You know? I mean, what kind of baby, everyone gets a prize culture are we living in that people aren't responsible for their own actions?
Yeah,
like
no, that to me, that's really that fighting words idea has the implication behind it that people can't control themselves.
Yeah,
which is absurd. Like I'm not a very aggressive person. So I admit that, but I know that I cannot possibly imagine a scenario where someone saying something to me would make me involuntarily strike them.
Yeah.
Or violate their private property in some way. And I believe that there probably are some people out there who would have a really hard time not doing it. I don't think that's an excuse.
Yeah.
That idea comes with the assumption that there are situations where adults cannot control themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that is a extremely slippery slope.
Yeah, definitely. But other things I don't feel like I described a verbal act well enough, because some of them could be like, okay, say that you walk into a bank, you have a gun on you, you write on a note, or you say to the teller, put the money in the bag.
Yeah.
That is a verbal act. Or say that it's illegal to threaten someone's life credibly. Mm-hmm. If you go up to someone with a gun, and you don't have it, but you say, I have a gun, I'm going to kill you if you don't do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
That would be a verbal act. But it's in making the distinction between verbal acts that are illegal and, speech.
And speech, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I would support if you have a law, in a free market society, you have a law that condemns acts that are, credibly threatening someone's life. That's also a slippery slope.
Yeah.
But there are certain, I do believe this exists, that there's certain situations like that where a verbal act should be illegal. If you're robbing a bank like that.
Yeah. Yeah. But there'd be things where there is going to be the threat of an immediate violent act.
Yeah, and that would be the verbal act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I that's something to think about. I know that. So this is an interesting idea that I didn't really realize for quite a while. But when a judge makes a ruling, it is an opinion. Correct? Like that, isn't it? Like it's explicitly said as it's an opinion.
Well,
like within,
it depends on what level of court you're in.
But within theories of law, like how law works, or like how law would work in a stateless society, it would be there would be an arbitrator who would be making who would be looking at the particular incident and would be giving an opinion on it, right?
Yeah. Well, so if you're there's 3 different levels of court in the United States. There's district courts. Well, okay, within a state, there's a district court. In Wisconsin, they're called circuit courts. Then there's an appellate level court, and then there's a Supreme Court. And that's within a state. And at the federal level, there's the same thing: federal district court, appellate court, and Supreme Court. And so half the battle is deciding jurisdiction, but I digress.
Yeah.
At the circuit court level or the district court, that's when you get the facts. You get all the facts of the case. There's what's called discovery, and attorneys will serve documents on each other and request discovery. So you try and find out what happened. And half the battle is deciding what the facts are and which facts are admissible in the trial.
Yeah.
And so that's the job there. And when there is a decision given, usually it's either a judge or a jury if you're doing a trial. And you can choose usually which one. But the judge gives a decision. And that's what it's called at that level. And usually those decisions are oral, but they're transcribed.
Yep.
Or they can be written decisions. It depends on what you're doing. But at the appellate level, there's a board of justices, and the justices write opinions.
Okay.
And there's the majority opinion, and there's so if usually it's 9, the majority would be 5-4. That'd be a real close split decision. But the 5 would write. Usually they band together to write one opinion, and then one justice will be designated the responsibility of writing the opinion.
Yep.
There can be concurring opinions, and in fact there can be no majority. Like, there can be a ruling, and within the 5 justices there can be 5 different concurring opinions. And then so part of the trouble, and stop me if I'm saying too much.
No, I think this is pretty interesting.
Okay. And then so there's 5. So I've dealt with certain cases, exercises at school, where you have. Oh, this is getting complicated. But so, like, say at the federal level, in the federal appellate court, if, for example, there's the Ninth Circuit is notorious for being super duper liberal, and guess where that is?
DC,
California.
Yeah.
I think it's it's Oregon and Washington, the West Coast.
Yeah.
And so they blocked Trump's travel ban.
Mm-hmm.
But I've dealt with certain cases where there is like 5 different concurring opinions, and you have to decide what the law is based on. And then so, like, in certain appellate districts will disagree with each other.
Yeah. And
that's called the circuit split. And so you have to. And the Supreme Court is expected, if the case gets to that level, you have to delineate from, if you're an attorney arguing, you have to delineate, okay, the circuits are split. Which rule should we adopt?
Yeah.
And we have to adopt it for the entire country. and everyone within the country is supposed to be okay with it.
Yeah.
But so what was your original question? I'm sorry.
Oh, I actually think that we got...
Oh, the decision.
This decision, yeah.
So at the district level, if we're arbitrating a case in a free market society.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's like, what would be the mechanisms to avoid this, the verbal act from expanding to include things that...
I think if you have 2 DROs, dispute resolution organizations, I think efficiency would be it. What can we efficiently enforce? And if it costs too much to enforce a certain law, like victimless crimes, and David D. Friedman talks about this in The Machinery of Freedom, and we'll have an episode on this too about how law would work in a free market. But he's saying that, would an anarcho-capitalist society be libertarian? And he was saying that a libertarian society respects the individual and against violence and all that crap. But good stuff, not crap. But it's not cost effective, to try and enforce a rule that would necessitate, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that.
And Yeah, actually, that I don't know if that would solve the verbal act. I guess it would depend on what people subscribe to,
Yeah.
or if a court gives a certain ruling and it's unpopular. I don't know.
Yeah. I just think that was an interesting idea, just to, because you're admitting that this verbal act idea is something that would be slippery.
Yeah, yeah, it could be slippery, I think.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be clear cut, throughout. If you have the common law string of decisions,
Yeah.
I think a court could deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
I have pretty good faith that in a court's ability to deal with these problems.
Yeah, I have a lot of faith in law within a voluntary society, because it would be, judges aren't dictated. It is something that, like, the adjudication is something that two parties agree upon, which I think is really important.
Yeah, yeah. But moreover, when it comes to my faith in judges' ability to find law and make decisions like that, I would refer to the ratification of the Constitution, because when the Constitution was ratified, everyone had to figure out what it meant, and especially when it came to admiralty law and administrative law. More so admiralty law.
What exactly is that?
Like, how do we, in international law too.
Okay.
But when it comes to, like, on the high seas, if we have ships in dispute, what's the jurisdiction? Where are we getting the law from?
Oh, right.
And so what you have is, in admiralty law, you have justices hearkening way back to antiquity.
Yeah.
And Virgil and all these, and they pulled law from it.
Yeah, so they weren't like, they weren't looking to the Constitution for what should be done.
Yeah, because no one knew what it meant.
They're looking to common law roots.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's crazy. But
we went a bit on a law tirade there.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I hope you find it as interesting as I do, because this is something that I know very little about. It's always neat to learn.
Yeah, I hope the audience learned a little bit about how our justice system works, because to be honest, a lot of this stuff I was learning anew when I came into law school. Just how everything works together, and because you forget in your American Gov class in high school, you're in high school. You don't.
Oh yeah,
it's
yeah,
and
it's
don't have
no
enough,
way close to that detailed.
Yeah, and you don't have enough worldly experience to really visualize how it works, I think. And so, but I think so. In this episode, we talked about we started with the Laci Green Affair, and the SJWs, and that led to First Amendment concerns. And then that's how we got to the law.
Yep. And we hope that you enjoyed the ride
and followed it.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
But so we just want to thank the audience and thank everyone for tuning in to the Liberty Weekly podcast for I guess it's the Liberty Weekly bi-weekly podcast, or
we'll see.
We'll see.
Now it's bi-weekly.
Yeah. So thanks so much. I'd just like to once again exhort everyone, the audience, to give us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music. Subscribe on YouTube, subscribe through all those platforms. The subscriptions, obviously, and the reviews is how we get more exposure on these platforms. So it's important to try and grow the audience through those means. But I'd like to plug my email list a little more, because I sent out a good email about the Kathy Griffin affair and about how it doesn't matter and that it's a distraction to keep you from more important things and to divide you. And so that's an example of the type of emails that I would send out. Also, we're extending out the email giveaway for a Steam or Amazon gift card. I think we're going to extend that for another week here, and that'll be the last extension. So we'll have a drawing for that next Sunday at noon, I think, is when the cutoff will be. But otherwise, we really appreciate you tuning in for another episode of the Liberty Weekly podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.